Thank you guys for being here today. The conclusion of practice 16, which is actually our last real afternoon practice. Obviously, we'll do some stuff on Sunday afternoons throughout the season, but our true last afternoon practice of training camp. Give the guys a golf day tomorrow with just some meetings, and then transition to a morning practice, which is more the norm once school starts for our guys on Monday, and then we can get into a regular routine if there is such a thing in college football. But it was good to get out there in the heat today. Right? We've had some of these where we've been trying to get out there in the afternoons, and we've had some lightning in the area and have had to come to this beautiful indoor, which we love being in, but we still got to get acclimated to the heat. We know how warm it's going to be for the first game, and the only thing you do is work and prepare out there for quite a long time. So today we were able to do that. Been pleased with a lot of things from camp. Seen a lot of growth from a lot of guys, but I still say this: we're still 12 days away from that first game, and we are not a finished product. But the guys are working hard. We're seeing some good depth in a lot of places. Guys have solidified some starting jobs, if there is such a thing as well, and I've been pleased with that. On the injury front, Cortland Marsh has an injury and will be missing the entire season, unfortunately. We know that he got hurt last season, and unfortunately, Cortland will be out for the entire year. He had surgery last week, and just, you feel for him. Such a tremendous young man that, I think is going to be a defensive captain for us that the players loved, the community loved, and, certainly was going to be a great fixture for us back there in the secondary. But there's no woe is me. He's sitting there saying, hey, just like with everything, next man up, let's go get it. And that's kind of been the mindset of this group, right? We probably lost our most decorated offensive lineman in the middle of spring football to transfer, and there was no woe is me. It's next guy up, let's keep battling. So we put our smile on our faces. Obviously, we pray for Cortland, put our hands around him and say, okay, hey, we're going to keep battling it and getting better for you. And I think that's kind of been the mindset no matter what happens to our guys. Cade Law will also be lost for a short period of time. I don't believe it'll be season ending, but I'll keep you guys up to date as that progresses. Other than that, we feel relatively healthy other than, the normal wear and tear and soreness for the 16 practices of training camp. Excited to move forward. We'll talk more about the UT Chattanooga game as we get ready for that, but that'll be really start honing in our focus. Most first 16 practices are really self-reflective and seeing how we can improve and seeing who can do things. And then really come back on Wednesday, we'll start introducing some UT chat and getting ready for that first game.
Cortez fishing on roster now, just how has it been just kind of getting him expedited with the playbook?
Sure, that was always the first thing, right? There's twofold, right? One, hey, can he learn the offensive playbook? And then two, what's that conditioning look like, right? There's a big difference, going wherever you came from. If he was out in Nevada, I know he's spent some time in South Carolina, but just getting acclimated to the way we do things, the way we work. And then also, oh, by the way, here's a pretty complex playbook. Get to know it. So we're trying to kind of leave him at one wide receiver position. He does have great intelligence and a great work ethic in trying to learn the playbook. So we're going to continue to see his growth. I'm sure fans will say, oh, is he rolling out there and go play 80 plays? I think that's unrealistic. But we will have high expectations for him. And we're going to hold him to, hey, but how can we continue to get you better off days, spending some extra time with the coaches? Obviously he's got good rapport with Brendan Lewis. Which go, I think, a lot of times at night they're meeting, hey, we'll get out of here at 9 o'clock at night, and next thing you know, they're staying up a few more hours to get some work in. But we know what he's capable of. Obviously, would be our top rated from a reception standpoint receiver returning on this roster. But it's the 7th year, so we got to be mindful of that. That's a lot of work on those legs, but just kind of get him into the groove of things and see how he fits in. But we've got high expectations for him.
But you do expect him to be far gone enough in the playbook to be available for.
He will dress game one. Yeah, that's the plan. He'll dress game one, and then what does that look like? We'll see, right? I mean, we'll see where the other wide receivers are. We've got pretty good guys in that room that we have a lot of trust in, but I think he'll fit in nicely. Obviously, the cohesiveness has been there, and then just kind of see how it fits.
As an offensive line coach, how do you feel about the progression? One of the places that was hit hard by graduation transfers.
Sure.
How do you feel about the
let's just let's talk about it. First off, I think it's one of those groups that's got some depth, which is I always say every year. If I can tell you the offensive line has depth, that's a positive. And I think they've come along nicely. It's really one of the most athletic offensive lines we've ever had. Now we've had some bigger bodies, we've had some of those things, but it starts with Chris Adams. Just a tremendous young man that I think has a chance to be a high draft pick and an elite level talent at the left tackle spot. He had the opportunity to leave and decided to stay. Brought in Travis Burke. Anybody, if you guys haven't had the chance to meet him, it'll be hard. He'll be walking past this. We'll have to get a higher banner. He's 6'8.5", legit, 325, and he'll be the right tackle. As of right now, no one's guaranteed spots. Been pleased. Malachi Braylon, one of the returning starters. He's doing some nice things. And then at the right guard spot, probably looking at Parker Mitchell right now, has got probably the most snaps there. And then Jakari Walker's gotten a lot of work with the ones. We also have Austin General, kind of those guys battling for that center spot. But as we know, as we get closer and closer to game day, find that 5. But I'm pleased with it. I really am. I think we got guys that can move around different spots. Going against our defense every day, we know the multiple looks. I certainly think we've seen every possible look we can see during training camp, and they've done a nice job with it.
As Cortland Marsh goes, is he going to be able to come back next year? And what does that do to your defensive backfield?
Well, I know you have the inside number to the NCAA, Dave, so maybe you can call and say, hey, can we get that waiver? To be honest, we have not even brushed. I was let him get through the surgery, kind of catch his breath. I can only imagine, how catastrophic. He's been in the building, even prior to the surgery, knowing he had to have it. He was in meetings. He was taking notes. He was writing down things. So, we'll see. We'll see what that means for his career. I don't know if the NCAA will allow him to have a medical. Kind of look at. I don't really know what that's going to look like in the future. I kind of just said, hey, you just focus on the rehab, getting better, taking care of however we can help you, and then figure that out. If he says, hey, next year, if the NCAA doesn't grant him, I think he wants to be a strength coach. So, maybe we can find room for him there. If the NCAA says, hey, let's let him play one more year, obviously we'd welcome him back with open arms. I think the biggest thing Cortland brought was, experience. Even though he was hurt last year, he's played a lot of football. You think about the Tulane game where he came back after his hand injury and made some big plays, a couple forced fumbles on some things. Just his leadership and what he meant to some of those new faces in that secondary. But we got great admiration for those other guys that are back there, Dave, and I think they'll fill in nicely. We do play a 3 safety defense, so we do have some depth in seeing where those guys. We're still moving guys around. Hey, was this guy better fit in the Tiger or the Rover? Where does this guy better to the field or to the boundary? So still exploring that, but that's a tough one. But there's no woe is me. It's okay. Hey, next man up. Let's go find a way to attack this thing.
Hey, Coach, I know it's still 12 days out, but how would you rate your 3 units as far as getting to where you want to be? Are they trending in the right direction, roller coaster still, or is it smoothing out?
Yeah, Terry, I think that's what you want to see is you want to see that slow part. If on day 1 of training camp everything looked perfect, I'd say, wait, something's wrong. Either I don't have high enough expectations or I'm not holding them accountable enough. So I think we've seen is, days 1 through 16, we've seen a nice progress by everybody. And there's some days, right, like you go and you watch a scrimmage and, man, the defense really looked good for this first 4 series, and then offense hits an explosive, and then they're able to run the ball. And so there are some roller coasters. The biggest thing, what I want our guys to do is not have roller coasters during their emotions, right? Go out there and be mentally tough for 24 periods and go practice from period 1 to period 24. But I am pleased. I think, we're seeing progress in special teams, a lot of new faces there. A lot of hungry guys that want to say, hey, I need to see the field. And that's, I think, when you bring in that many transfers, a lot of them hadn't played a ton of football. And they say, hey, if this is my best chance to play for the Tigers, I'll do whatever it takes. So that's been good. And, I think, again, you look back at it, we're returning 3 total starters from last year's squad. 2 of them on the offensive line and 1 on the defensive line. So the communication is one of those things we got to continue to work on. I think that's important because teams are going to line up knowing, right, that there's some new faces back there to try a bunch of different things. And so we've been pressing on that. But I've been pleased. I think the biggest thing that, we've seen, and you always, Terry, which I appreciate you always asking this, like camaraderie is there. They've built that teamwork. They're working really hard together. They seem to care about each other. It's really unique, right? We've had some of these locker rooms where guys have been together 4 and 5 years, and they're not as close-knit as this one, and that's been a lot of fun to watch.
You mentioned earlier guys who have kind of started to separate themselves. I know you just went through with the offensive line. Are there other positions where there's guys who have kind of risen to the front at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all know, right, what the expectations for Greg DeWosier and Sutton Smith, right? I think that I'm really pleased. Obviously, Brennan Lewis was named the starter somehow, was named the starter, and he's done a really nice job. Again, with him, we still have great faith in the other quarterbacks on our roster. I think he was the most consistent. The wide receivers, I think for the first time, last year we knew, right, Rock Taylor, Demir Blankovsky, Kobe Drake, we kind of knew. The wide receivers is going to be okay. I think it's going to be a little bit by committee, and that's okay. It's not that none of them can play. It's because, we got 7 that we feel really comfortable with right now at this time. They can go out there and take the field, and maybe that allows you, in August and September, with the heat and playing some snaps, those guys to be fresh when they go out there. Tight end, Bryce Anderson's done some really good things. You guys got to see, how impressive he was in the spring. Christian Russell, a name we probably haven't talked a ton about, now going into year 3, but he's kind of elevated himself to be in the tight end rotation. And then you look at the D-line, the guy, no one ever talks about nose guard. Peter Walker is a name that transferred from Kennesaw State. It's really, really had a nice offseason, kind of come into his own as he understood the defensive scheme. The D-line has depth. It does, and just as I was bragging about the O-line having some depth, it's nice we got some depth on the D-line. Taylor Burton is doing some great things. Ray Buell, just to name a few, and then Jalen Bell. I'm just telling you, write that name down. He's a D-lineman that transferred to Tennessee State. Battled some injuries. If he can stay healthy, I think he's going to be a force to be reckoned with. And then the secondary, like I said, some different guys trying out the safety spots. I feel really comfortable. Chauncey Logan, he's been more impressive than I thought. Obviously, going and watching all his JMU film at corner, him and Duke, Omarion Cooper. I think those two are kind of solidifying themselves a chance to be really, really good corners.
Coach, I know you're going to game week mode this weekend with Chattanooga come up, so you prep specifically for them next week. So what's the biggest need, or the biggest what do you need to get accomplished this last week before you start prepping for Chattanooga?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, as you always go into game one, and Jeff, you and I will talk about this on the radio show, is really making sure you can control what you can control. Like, can we tackle? And what's going to end up happening is, you guys already know this Saturday there's going to be some college football games on. And I won't watch them, but there'll be somebody watching them for me and telling me what's going on. And they're going to pull it up and say, okay, how many missed tackles were in this game? And we're going to show our guys, like, listen, these are game one things, whether it's jitters or just the big difference between tackling maybe a scout team body or a donut or a bag, and all of a sudden, you hadn't tackled a live body in 3 weeks, and you got somebody rolling at you. So you got to continue to make sure we're doing tackling appropriately, and it all the time. And this is not coach. We're talking about taking care of the football. Right? It's really important for us to be one of the top teams in the country in turnover margin like we were last year. And that's one of those things we got to continue to harp with. Some of these new guys, I said, how much did y'all talk about ball security? How much did y'all talk about closing the back door, getting that ball? Oh, we didn't talk about it. And so that's one of those things we got to live it and preach it. We want to get that cleaned up, and then we'll say, okay, what's the game plan got to look like? There's some unknowns. I mean, you look at their roster, and just like ours, they're pricing. They're saying, okay, do we need to watch film with this guy at school X? Do we need to watch this, school Z? And but really, I think as you continue to get closer, make sure we're handling our own business, and then let's find out, what schematically we need to put in place in order to go out there and handle our business week one.
With the quarterbacks, I know you mentioned not having a 2 and a 3 between Arrington and AJ. Is that something that throughout the season it could go week by week, or how do you want that to kind of work out?
Yeah, I think, right, it's the good news is I feel comfortable. Like, there's years past where someone's asked me about a spot and they're like, tell us about the 2 or 3. I'm like, yeah, and it just kind of nonchalantly just kind of bled into a bunch of verbal diarrhea, right? Like, I feel really good about both those guys, and I think those guys can both go out there and compete at a high level. It's getting a feel for, right? AJ, they're both young. And so, Jonah, I think every week we get to see progression. We'll see where they're at. If the first one goes in, we haven't had that discussion. I told Graham, I don't want to have it. Let's see what they can still do. We still got a couple more days before we even have to sit there and say, if B-Lou loses a shoelace, who's going in? And I think that's part of it. We'll get there. It could be week by week as they continue to progress. But the great news is I feel very, very comfortable with both of them.
With only 3 starters back, you're not the only team like that. Do you think college football coming together of a team goes from like the second game where it used to be to the 4th game now?
I think, Dave, was interesting because part of it is, right, you get spring football, and even then, right, like I think we had 27 guys in spring, if you go to that, then all of a sudden you have these OTAs, so you get a little bit of work, the training camp. I think the product, I hope we're playing our best football in November and December and hopefully beyond, which would be a wonderful thing. You talk to some of these NFL coaches, right? It used to be the day and age of 4 preseason games and the stars would play the first 3, all the way into the 3rd quarter. And now it's less and less, and people say, well, the first few NFL games are pretty sloppy, especially with the cohesion of the offensive line, the communication in the secondary. So, I think every chance you get to line up and play a true opponent, you're going to learn a lot more, right? Like someone said, how good is the team? And, I feel really great about our team. I have very high expectations. But it may be October before every single one of us in this building truly knows what we have, including myself and the coaching staff. Yes, we study our guys. We know what they're capable of. But I think sometimes you go out there and put that ball on the ground and say, all right, here we go. Let's start this thing up, what we truly have.
Hey, Ryan, I know you didn't see it, but the Steelers have 5 of your former players on their roster. What did that say about the program and where it's headed?
Well, first off, give a lot of credit to Coach Mike Tomlin, right? You know, was a grad assistant here. You guys have heard me talk on that before. And so he's always said, like, when I've visited with him, even in the past, me and Mike Norvell went up and visited him a long time ago when we first got here for an OTA. And he just says, I think the kids in Memphis that go through that program, that appreciate, we always talk about the old Grizzlies slogan, the grit and grind, like they're going to fit his mindset, the Steeler mindset, right? You think about some of those guys that have come through there, and that all the people said, like, he loves bringing in Memphis guys. And then going back to even his coordinators back in the day, right? Two guys that had coached here for a long time that were on his staff, and now you got Art Smith up there, right? You know, and him and I have a great relationship. So I think it's a tremendous thing. I think it's great when an NFL franchise that's had that success, that much sustainability with the head coach and ownership, and all those people to sit back and say, hey, you know what? We really like that college program. So if it makes sense for us to bring in a guy from there, you know, we're going to do it. And I think, you know, that's a huge set for us in recruiting. Hey, listen, if you and a player from School X have very similar abilities, have very similar characteristics, you have a better chance to go to this team simply because of here and the relationship we've had and the belief in our type of guys. It speaks volumes to the culture that we've been able to create here year after year after year. And look, I'm a Steeler fan. Thank you guys. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Ryan.